In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and winding roads, there was a small diner that everyone loved. It wasn't fancy, but it had charm. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and the smell of fresh coffee wafting through the air. People came here for breakfast after church or to grab lunch during work breaks. The diner felt like home to many, including an elderly woman who walked in one crisp morning. Her name wasn't important right then, but her presence was hard to miss. She carried herself with grace, dressed neatly in a tailored coat and scarf, even though she looked frail. Her silver hair was pulled back into a perfect bun, and her sharp blue eyes scanned the room as if searching for something. Or someone. She took a seat at a corner booth, away from the chatter of other customers, and opened a book while waiting for her order. Across the room stood a young waitress balancing 2 trays stacked high with plates of pancakes, bacon, and eggs. Her name tag read Mia, and she moved quickly between tables, refilling coffee cups and handing out checks with a warm smile. Despite her tired eyes and worn-out sneakers, Mia radiated kindness. There was something about her that made people feel seen, even when they were just ordering toast. As fate would have it, Mia approached the older woman's table to refill her cup. The moment their eyes met, time seemed to stop. The woman froze mid-reach for her spoon, staring at Mia with an intensity that startled her. For a second, neither said anything. Then, without warning, the woman reached out and grabbed Mia's wrist tightly. You have my daughter's eyes," the woman whispered hoarsely, her voice trembling with emotion. Mia blinked, surprised by the sudden contact and the weight of those words. She tried to pull her hand away gently, unsure how to respond. Was this some kind of prank? Or maybe the woman was confused. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Mia replied politely, forcing a small laugh to lighten the mood. "I think you might be mistaken." But the woman didn't let go. Instead, she leaned closer, studying Mia's face intently. Her grip softened, but her gaze remained fixed as though she were trying to memorize every detail. "No, I'm not mistaken," she insisted softly. "Your eyes, they're hers. Exactly like hers." For a moment, Mia felt a strange chill run down her spine. She didn't know what to say. This sort of thing didn't happen often, not in her ordinary life anyway. Most days, she blended into the background, serving meals and exchanging pleasantries with strangers. But this encounter felt different. Something about the way the woman spoke, the raw emotion in her voice, made Mia hesitate. "I'll get your coffee," Mia murmured finally, slipping her hand free and stepping back. The woman nodded slowly, still watching her as if afraid she might disappear. As Mia turned to walk away, she couldn't help glancing over her shoulder. Who was this woman? And why did she look so heartbroken? Back at the counter, Mia poured another cup of coffee, replaying the moment in her head. Sure, people sometimes complimented her on her green eyes. They were striking against her dark hair, but no one had ever reacted quite like that. It was almost as if the woman saw more than just her eyes. It was as if she saw a ghost from her past. Meanwhile, the woman sat alone in her booth, lost in thought. She stared at the empty chair across from her, imagining someone sitting there. Someone who used to fill her days with laughter and light, someone who had been gone far too long. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let anyone see her cry. She hadn't planned on coming to this diner today. In fact, she rarely visited places like this anymore. But something had drawn her here, a faint whisper of intuition she couldn't ignore. Now looking at Mia, she wondered if she'd been led here for a reason. Could it really be possible? After all these years, could she have found a piece of what she'd lost? By the time Mia returned with the coffee, the woman had composed herself. She accepted the cup with a quiet thank you, her hands shaking slightly as she brought it to her lips. Mia lingered for a moment, unsure whether to ask questions or simply leave. Something about the woman intrigued her. Maybe it was the sadness in her expression, or maybe it was the way she seemed to cling to hope despite everything. "Are you okay?" Mia asked hesitantly, breaking the silence. The question hung in the air for a beat before the woman nodded. "Yes," she said softly, though her voice betrayed the storm brewing inside her. "Thank you." Mia gave her a polite smile and moved on to serve other customers, but her mind kept drifting back to the woman in the corner booth. What had she meant by my daughter's eyes? And why did it feel like their meeting wasn't just coincidence? Little did either of them know. This chance encounter would set off a chain of events neither could have anticipated. A story decades in the making was about to unfold, weaving together threads of love, loss, and destiny in ways neither Mia nor the mysterious woman could imagine. And as the sun rose higher outside the diner window, casting golden light over the checkered floor, the first chapter of their intertwined lives began to take shape, one cup of coffee at a time. The elderly woman left the diner that morning with a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. She climbed into the back seat of a sleek black car, her hands trembling as she clutched her purse. Her driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror, noticing how pale she looked. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked cautiously. She nodded but didn't speak. Instead, she stared out the window, watching the town blur past as they drove away. Her mind was racing, replaying every detail of the encounter with the young waitress. Those eyes, those piercing green eyes, had haunted her dreams for years. They belonged to someone she thought she'd never see again, someone she had spent decades searching for. Back at home, she paced the length of her grand living room, unable to sit still. The house was enormous, filled with antiques and priceless art, yet it felt empty. It always did. Money and luxury couldn't fill the gaping hole in her heart left by the loss of her only child, her daughter, who had vanished without a trace over 40 years ago. She sank into an armchair, pulling out the faded photograph she kept tucked away in her wallet. It was worn from years of handling, its edges frayed and colors faded. In the picture, a young woman smiled brightly, her green eyes sparkling with mischief. That smile used to light up the entire room. Now all that remained were memories and questions that had no answers. Her thoughts drifted to the waitress. There was something about her beyond just the resemblance. Something in the way she carried herself, the kindness in her voice when she spoke. Could it really be possible? Could this girl somehow be connected to her missing daughter? The idea seemed too far-fetched, even for someone desperate enough to cling to hope. But what if it wasn't? That evening, she called her lawyer, a man named Thomas who had been with the family for decades. He arrived promptly, carrying his usual leather briefcase and wearing a look of concern. "What is it this time?" he asked gently, already guessing it had something to do with her long-lost daughter. Over the years, he had seen her chase countless leads, hire private investigators, and pour endless resources into finding answers. Each time the trail went cold, leaving her more broken than before. "I need you to find someone," she said firmly, her voice steadier now. She described the waitress, the green eyes, the dark hair, the gentle demeanor. "Start with the diner where I met her. Ask around. Find out who she is." Thomas hesitated. "Do you think this lead will pan out?" he asked carefully, not wanting to discourage her, but also wary of raising false hopes. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I can't ignore this feeling. Not this time." While the wealthy grandmother began her quest for answers, life continued as usual for Mia. She returned to her small apartment after her shift at the diner, exhausted but content. Her roommate, a bubbly college student named Lisa, was sprawled on the couch eating chips and scrolling through social media. "How was work?" Lisa asked absently, barely looking up from her phone. Same old," Mia replied, kicking off her sneakers and collapsing onto the recliner. But then she paused, remembering the strange interaction earlier. "Well, there was this one thing." Lisa perked up immediately. "Oh? Do tell." Mia recounted the story, describing the elegant older woman and her cryptic comment about her eyes. "It was weird," Mia admitted. "She acted like she knew me or something." "Like I reminded her of someone. Maybe you do," Lisa exclaimed excitedly. "You've got those gorgeous green eyes. Bet you remind her of some long-lost relative or something." Mia laughed, brushing off the suggestion. "Yeah, right. Like I'm secretly royalty or something." But deep down, the encounter lingered in her mind. It wasn't just the oddness of it. It was the intensity in the woman's gaze, the desperation in her voice. It made Mia wonder if maybe there was more to it. Still, she pushed the thought aside, convincing herself it was nothing more than a random coincidence. A few days later, Mia noticed something unusual. As she walked to the bus stop after her shift, she spotted a black car parked across the street. At first, she thought nothing of it. People often parked near the diner, but when she saw the same car the next day and the day after that, curiosity got the better of her. One evening, she decided to approach it cautiously. Peering inside, she found the vehicle empty, but there was a manila envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. Her name was written neatly on the front. Heart-pounding, she opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. On it was a grainy black-and-white photograph of a young woman holding a baby. The resemblance was uncanny. The woman in the photo could have been her twin. Confused and a little scared, Mia rushed home and confronted her adoptive parents. They had always been honest with her about being adopted, telling her stories of how they chose her from an agency when she was just a newborn. But now, staring at the mysterious photo, she demanded answers. Her mother sighed, sitting down at the kitchen table. "We've always suspected there might be more to your story," she confessed. "When we adopted you, the records were sealed. All we were told was that your biological mother was very young and couldn't care for you. We wanted to give you a good life, sweetheart. That's all that mattered to us." Mia listened silently, her head spinning. Had the woman at the diner somehow uncovered the truth? Was she connected to her birth mother? The questions swirled endlessly, keeping her awake late into the night. Unbeknownst to Mia, the grandmother was making progress. Through discreet inquiries and connections only someone of her status could access, she discovered that Mia had indeed been adopted. Further digging led her to a hospital where her own daughter had briefly worked during her college years. Records showed that a young woman matching her description had given birth there under mysterious circumstances. Tragically, the mother hadn't survived long after childbirth. As pieces of the puzzle began falling into place, the grandmother became convinced Mia was her granddaughter, her daughter's child. The realization brought both joy and sorrow. Joy because she finally had a connection to the daughter she had lost. Sorrow because it confirmed the worst, that her daughter was truly gone forever. One evening, unable to wait any longer, the grandmother showed up unannounced at Mia's doorstep. When Mia opened the door, she froze, recognizing the woman instantly. Before she could say anything, the grandmother held out the same faded photograph Mia had seen in the envelope. "This is your mother," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. "And I'm your grandmother." Mia stood frozen on the threshold of her apartment, staring at the older woman holding the faded photograph. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to process what was happening. The woman's words echoed in her ears. "This is your mother. And I'm your grandmother." It felt surreal, like something out of a movie or a dream. For a moment, Mia didn't know whether to slam the door shut or invite the stranger inside. She gripped the doorknob tightly, her knuckles turning white. Finally, with a shaky breath, she stepped aside and gestured for the woman to come in. "You'd better explain yourself," Mia said, her voice firm but tinged with confusion. The grandmother walked into the modest apartment, her eyes scanning the small space. Everything about it, the mismatched furniture, the stack of books on the coffee table, the faint smell of lavender candles, felt worlds away from the opulent life she was accustomed to. But none of that mattered now. All that mattered was the young woman standing before her, looking at her with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "I know this must be overwhelming," the grandmother began, sitting down on the edge of the couch. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the photograph. "But please believe me when I say I've waited decades for this moment." Mia crossed her arms over her chest, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to dismiss the whole thing as some bizarre misunderstanding. Another part, a deeper, quieter part, wanted desperately to hear more. "Start from the beginning," she said finally, sinking into the armchair across from the older woman, and so the grandmother told her story. She spoke of her daughter, a bright and spirited young woman who had dreams of becoming an artist. She described how her daughter had rebelled against the rigid expectations of their wealthy family, choosing instead to work odd jobs and pursue her passions. Then came the fateful summer when her daughter disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions. "She fell in love," the grandmother continued, her voice softening. with someone we didn't approve of. Someone different from us. There was no bitterness in her tone, just sadness. We never understood why she left. We thought maybe she needed time to figure things out. But then her voice cracked and she paused to collect herself. Then what? Mia prompted gently, leaning forward slightly. Then we found out she was pregnant, the grandmother whispered. By the time we learned the truth, it was too late. She died shortly after giving birth. The hospital records were vague, but they confirmed she passed away due to complications during childbirth. Tears streamed down her face as she added, "We searched everywhere for the baby, for you, but there was nothing. No leads, no answers. Until now." Mia sat in stunned silence, trying to wrap her head around everything she was hearing. It was a lot to take in, one shocking revelation after another. Her mind raced with questions. Was this really true? Could this woman truly be her grandmother? And if so, what did that mean for her life as she knew it? "You have to understand," the grandmother said earnestly, reaching out to touch Mia's hand. "I don't expect you to trust me right away. I wouldn't if I were in your shoes. But I swear to you, every word I've said is true. You're my granddaughter, my daughter's child." Mia pulled her hand back instinctively, not because she didn't want to believe the woman, but because she needed space to think. This wasn't just a piece of information, it was a bombshell that threatened to upend her entire world. She had always known she was adopted, but she never imagined her biological roots were tied to such wealth and tragedy. Over the next few days, Mia wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt a growing sense of connection to the grandmother. There was something genuine in the older woman's grief, something undeniable in the way her eyes lit up whenever she talked about her lost daughter. But on the other hand, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that accepting this newfound identity would change everything. Her adoptive parents noticed the shift in her behavior almost immediately. They saw the distracted look in her eyes, the way she picked at her food during dinner. When they asked what was wrong, Mia hesitated. She debated keeping the secret to herself, but ultimately decided they deserved to know. "They found me," she admitted quietly, showing them the photograph. Or rather, she did, my biological grandmother. Her adoptive parents exchanged worried glances. They had always feared this day might come, not because they doubted their bond with Mia, but because they knew it could bring upheaval. Still, they encouraged her to explore the connection. "You owe it to yourself to find out who you are," her adoptive father said gently, "no matter where it leads." With their blessing, Mia agreed to meet with the grandmother again. This time, the encounter took place in a quiet park near Mia's apartment. The two women sat side by side on a bench, watching children play and leaves dance in the breeze. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, yet comforting, like the calm before a storm. Finally, the grandmother broke the quiet. "I don't want to rush you," she said softly. "I know this is a lot to process, but I hope you'll give me a chance. To get to know you, to share stories about your mother. She was extraordinary, Mia, just like you." Mia turned to look at her, searching for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was vulnerability, raw and unfiltered. Slowly, tentatively, she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Let's start with her. Tell me about her." And so the grandmother began sharing memories of her daughter, stories of laughter-filled road trips, late-night conversations about art and life, and the stubborn streak that made her both infuriating and endearing. As Mia listened, she felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't happiness exactly, nor was it sadness. It was something in between, a bittersweet ache that reminded her of home. Over the following weeks, their meetings became more frequent. Sometimes they talked for hours. Other times, they simply sat together in companionable silence. With each passing day, Mia grew more comfortable with the idea of having a grandmother, and with the reality that her life was far more complex than she had ever imagined. But challenges lay ahead. The media caught wind of the story thanks to whispers among the staff at the diner and prying reporters eager for a scoop. Headlines blared across newspapers and TV screens. "Billionaire heiress discovers long-lost granddaughter." Paparazzi camped outside Mia's apartment building, snapping photos and shouting questions whenever she stepped outside. At first, Mia felt suffocated by the attention. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the constant scrutiny made her question whether she had made the right decision in reconnecting with her biological family. The grandmother, however, stood by her side, shielding her as best she could from the chaos. "It's not fair to drag you into this world," the grandmother admitted one evening, her voice heavy with guilt. "I should have been more careful, more discreet. But I couldn't wait any longer. Not after finding you." Mia shook her head, surprising even herself with her response. "It's not your fault," she said firmly. "If anything, it's proof that people care about our story. Maybe it's messy, maybe it's complicated, but it's ours. And I'm not going to let anyone else dictate how it unfolds." Her words shocked the grandmother, not because of their defiance, but because of their strength. In that moment, she realized Mia wasn't just her granddaughter. She was a fighter, someone who refused to be defined by circumstances beyond her control. As the dust settled and the initial frenzy died down, Mia and her grandmother found themselves standing at a crossroads. Their bond had grown stronger, but the path forward remained uncertain. What role would Mia play in the family empire? Could she reconcile her humble upbringing with the extravagant lifestyle awaiting her? And most importantly, could she honor the memory of a mother she never knew while forging her own identity? These questions lingered in the air, unanswered, but not ignored. Together, they vowed to face whatever came next, not as strangers bound by blood, but as family united by love. The media circus surrounding Mia and her grandmother began to die down after a few weeks, but the ripple effects of their newfound connection lingered. For Mia, life felt like it had been split into two halves, the quiet, predictable world she once knew, and the whirlwind of luxury and responsibility that now loomed on the horizon. She tried to keep up with her routine, working at the diner, spending time with her adoptive parents, and hanging out with Lisa. But everything seemed tinged with uncertainty. Her grandmother, meanwhile, was struggling in her own way. The weight of years spent searching for answers, only to find them so unexpectedly, had taken its toll. She had always been a strong woman, used to commanding boardrooms and making decisions with precision. But this was different. This wasn't about business or wealth. It was about family, love, and healing wounds that had festered for decades. One evening, as they sat together in the grandmother's sprawling library, surrounded by shelves lined with leather-bound books and antique artifacts, the older woman turned to Mia with a look of determination. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "And I want you to be honest with me." Mia put down the book she'd been flipping through and gave her full attention. "Okay," she replied cautiously. "What is it?" "Would you consider taking your place in the family?" the grandmother asked, her eyes searching Mia's face for any hint of hesitation. "Not because I'm asking you to, but because it's what your mother would have wanted. You're part of this legacy, whether you choose to embrace it or not." Mia blinked, caught off guard by the question. It wasn't the first time the idea had crossed her mind, but hearing it spoken aloud made it feel real and overwhelming. "I don't know if I can do that," she admitted. "I mean, look at my life. I work at a diner, I live paycheck to paycheck, and I barely finished high school. How am I supposed to step into all of this?" She gestured around the room, encompassing the grandeur of the house and everything it represented. "You underestimate yourself," the grandmother said firmly. "You've survived without privilege, without connections. That makes you stronger than most people who grow up with everything handed to them. And besides, no one expects you to figure it all out overnight. We'll take it one step at a time." Mia chewed on her lip, considering the offer. Part of her was tempted. The thought of having access to resources that could help others, of honoring her mother's memory in such a tangible way, was appealing. But another part of her rebelled against the idea. Who was she to step into a world she didn't understand? What right did she have to claim a legacy that felt so foreign? "I need time to think about it," Mia said finally. "This isn't just about me. It's about my adoptive parents, my friends, my life. I can't just walk away from all of that." The grandmother nodded, understanding the complexity of Mia's position. "Take all the time you need," she said softly. But remember, you're not alone. I'll be here every step of the way." As days turned into weeks, Mia found herself torn between two worlds. On one side, there was the familiarity of her old life, the comforting rhythm of serving customers at the diner, laughing with Lisa over late-night snacks, and sharing quiet moments with her adoptive parents. On the other side, there was the glittering promise of a new future, a chance to make a difference, to honor her mother's memory, and to connect with the grandmother who had fought so hard to find her. Her adoptive parents noticed the internal struggle playing out in her eyes. One night, over dinner, her adoptive father leaned forward and placed a hand on hers. "We raised you to follow your heart," he said gently. "Whatever decision you make, we'll support you. Just promise us one thing, that you won't let fear hold you back." His words struck a chord deep within Mia. Fear had always been her constant companion, whispering doubts and insecurities in her ear. But now, faced with an opportunity she never imagined possible, she realized she couldn't let it dictate her choices anymore. With renewed resolve, Mia decided to give the family business a try, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to understand where she came from. Her grandmother wasted no time introducing her to the inner workings of the empire. They started small, touring offices and meeting key employees. At first, Mia felt completely out of her depth, overwhelmed by jargon and procedures she didn't understand. But slowly, piece by piece, she began to grasp the bigger picture. Her grandmother watched with pride as Mia navigated meetings, asked thoughtful questions, and showed genuine interest in the company's mission. "You're a natural," she told Mia one afternoon after a particularly successful presentation. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Hearing those words brought tears to Mia's eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine what her mother might have been like, not just as a daughter or a mother, but as a person. She pictured her laughing, painting, dreaming big dreams. And she realized that stepping into this role wasn't just about fulfilling expectations, it was about keeping her mother's spirit alive. Despite her growing confidence, challenges continued to arise. Some members of the family weren't thrilled about Mia's sudden inclusion in the dynasty. Whispers circulated about her lack of experience, her humble background, and whether she truly belonged. A distant cousin even went so far as to confront her at a charity gala, his tone dripping with condescension. "You don't belong here," he sneered, cornering her near the bar. "This isn't your world. You're just a waitress playing dress-up." Mia felt a surge of anger, but instead of lashing out, she met his gaze head-on. "Maybe I don't fit in yet," she said calmly. "But I'm learning, and unlike some people, I actually care about making a difference, not just protecting a bank account." Her response left him speechless, and word of the encounter quickly spread. To everyone's surprise, Mia earned respect for standing her ground. Even the skeptics began to see glimpses of the strength and resilience that defined her. Amidst the ups and downs, Mia and her grandmother grew closer than ever. They spent hours poring over old photo albums, sharing stories, and piecing together fragments of the past. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the woman who had connected them, a woman whose absence still cast a long shadow. One day, while sorting through boxes in the attic, they stumbled upon a collection of letters written by Mia's mother. In them, she poured out her hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. Reading her words felt like hearing her voice for the first time. By the end, both Mia and her grandmother were in tears, holding on to each other as they processed the depth of what they had lost and gained. Through it all, Mia never forgot where she came from. She stayed in touch with her adoptive parents, visited the diner whenever she could, and kept Lisa updated on her adventures. Balancing two worlds wasn't easy, but it reminded her of who she was and who she wanted to become. By the time months had passed, Mia had transformed in ways she never thought possible. She wasn't just the granddaughter of a billionaire. She was a bridge between two lives, two families, and two legacies. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, she faced it with courage, knowing she wasn't alone. The months flew by in a blur of activity, each day bringing new challenges and opportunities for Mia. She had settled into her role within the family business, though it wasn't without its struggles. Some days, she felt like an imposter, sitting in boardrooms filled with people who seemed to speak a language she barely understood. Other days, she surprised even herself with how much she had learned, and how naturally leadership came to her when she stopped doubting herself. Her grandmother watched her progress with a mixture of pride and relief. For years, she had shouldered the weight of running the empire alone, but now seeing Mia step up gave her a sense of hope she hadn't felt in decades. The two women had grown inseparable, their bond strengthened not just by blood but by shared experiences. They laughed together over old memories, cried together over letters from the past, and worked tirelessly to honor the legacy of the woman who connected them. But life has a way of reminding us that nothing lasts forever. One evening, during a charity gala hosted at the family estate, the unthinkable happened. The event was glamorous, as expected. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, guests mingled under soft music, and speeches celebrated the foundation's work, helping single mothers and children in need. Mia stood near the stage, watching her grandmother deliver a heartfelt address about resilience and second chances. It was a speech Mia had heard before, but tonight it carried extra weight because she knew how personal it was. As the applause died down, the grandmother stepped back from the microphone, looking pale and unsteady. Before anyone could react, she collapsed onto the floor. Chaos erupted instantly. People screamed, chairs scraped against the marble tiles, and someone shouted for a doctor. Mia pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding wildly as she knelt beside her grandmother. "Stay with me," she whispered, gripping the older woman's hand tightly. Paramedics arrived quickly, rushing her out of the ballroom on a stretcher while Mia followed close behind. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically, but the news wasn't good. The grandmother had suffered a severe stroke, and though she was stable, the road ahead would be long and uncertain. For the first time since discovering their connection, Mia felt truly alone. Her grandmother had been her anchor, the person guiding her through this strange new world. Without her, everything felt overwhelming. But instead of retreating, Mia found strength in the lessons her grandmother had taught her: resilience, determination, and above all, compassion. In the weeks that followed, Mia took charge of the family foundation with renewed purpose. She poured her energy into projects that aligned with her values, focusing on initiatives that supported adoption advocacy, education programs for underprivileged youth, and resources for single mothers. These causes weren't chosen randomly. They were deeply personal, reflecting both her own journey and the memory of her mother. At first, some members of the family questioned her decisions. "Why are you spending so much money on these issues?" one relative asked pointedly during a tense meeting. "We've always focused on high-profile ventures. This isn't what donors expect." Mia didn't flinch. "Maybe it's time we rethink what matters," she replied calmly. "These programs help people who need it most. Isn't that what Mom would have wanted? Isn't that why Grandma started this foundation in the first place?" Her conviction silenced the skeptics. Slowly but surely, they began to see the impact of her choices. Stories poured in from beneficiaries: a struggling single mom able to afford childcare thanks to a grant, a teenager given access to art classes that reignited her passion for painting, a foster child finding a forever home through adoption support services. Each story reminded everyone involved that wealth wasn't just about numbers in a bank account. It was about making lives better. Meanwhile, Mia visited her grandmother regularly at the rehabilitation center. Progress was slow, and there were moments when doubt crept in. Would she ever fully recover? Could she return to the life she once led? Despite the uncertainty, Mia refused to give up. She brought photo albums, read aloud from favorite books, and shared updates about the foundation. Even if her grandmother couldn't respond, Mia believed she could feel the love and effort being poured into every visit. One afternoon, as Mia sat by her bedside holding her hand, the grandmother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy but alert. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, with great effort, the grandmother squeezed Mia's hand weakly. "You're doing well," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "I'm proud of you. Tears streamed down Mia's face as she leaned closer. "Don't talk like that," she said, forcing a smile. "You're going to get better. We still have so much to do together." The grandmother managed a faint smile, her gaze soft and loving. "Promise me something," she murmured. "Don't let fear hold you back. Keep going. You're stronger than you think." It was the last thing she said before drifting back to sleep. Though fragile, her words stayed with Mia, echoing in her mind whenever self-doubt surfaced. Months later, the foundation held another gala, the first major event since the stroke. This time, however, things were different. Instead of glitz and glamour, the focus was on authenticity. Beneficiaries shared their stories on stage. Volunteers were honored for their dedication, and Mia delivered a speech that brought the entire room to tears. "When I first stepped into this world, I felt like an outsider," she admitted, her voice steady but emotional. "I didn't know if I belonged here or if I could live up to the expectations placed on me. But then I realized something. It's not about fitting into someone else's mold. It's about creating your own path, one that honors where you come from while reaching toward where you want to go." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before continuing. "My mother may not have had the chance to raise me, but her spirit lives on in everything I do. And my grandmother. She showed me that family isn't just about bloodlines. It's about love, sacrifice, and believing in each other even when the odds seem impossible." The audience erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. For Mia, the moment wasn't about recognition. It was about gratitude. Gratitude for the adoptive parents who raised her, for the diner co-workers who became friends, for the grandmother who fought so hard to find her, and for the mother whose memory inspired her every step of the way.